Whispers from Below, a horror podcast by Justin W. Geis. Scary stories, both real and fake. Hello, listeners. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 8 of Whispers from Below, a podcast by a madman for madmen. I'm your resident psychopath, Justin W. Geis, and today's topic of discussion is Leprechaun, or the 1993 film Leprechaun. Now, I know that St. Patrick's Day just passed, and I kind of missed it, but in honor of St. Patrick's Day and March and, four-leaf clovers and such, I wanted to do this episode. This is also the first time I'm doing an episode on specifically a movie, so let me know if this is something that you guys like. Just a warning, there is a little bit of graphic content in this, but overall it's pretty funny, so I think that this is a pretty okay episode to listen to. If you're a younger audience member, I think that this is totally acceptable as an episode. If there's a little bit of echo, if there's a little bit of different sounds and what's going on due to coronavirus, I have left my New York City apartment and I am currently staying at my boyfriend's parents' house in Cleveland. Shout out to Kelly and Dan for letting us stay here. It is very nice of you and I appreciate it very, very much. So I'm recording in a new space, so if it sounds a little bit different, that's why. So to start, I'll just give you some background information about the film, and then we'll dive into a full synopsis, Justin Geis style, which is, pretty extra. So to start, this is a 1993 film, and this was Jennifer Aniston's first movie. So this is kind of like where she got her start, and she actually appears later in one of the sequels that was created, but we'll get into that a little bit later. This was her film debut, and Warwick Davis played the title role. A lot of you might know him from Harry Potter, but he played Leprechaun. And he did it for, I think, 6 of the 8 films, and then was like, I gotta stop. But this was the first film to be produced in-house by Trimark, and it was the first film that was produced in-house to be theatrically released. This film has been called Aniston's worst film. It had a ton of negative reviews upon release, as it was supposed to be a straight horror film. Like, this was meant to be something that was, like, scary, up there with, like, Friday the 13th and Halloween and stuff like that. It was part of the slasher genre, and it was written and directed by Mark Jones, and he really wanted it to be, like, a little bit comedic, but he wanted it to be mostly, like, a straight horror movie. And if you've ever seen it or seen any clips from it, you know that's just, like, not it. Like, it's so funny and so ridiculous and so wild. It has a 23% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is just, like, so sad. Like, that is such a sad score. It's such a terrible film. And it managed to get 6 sequels and a remake because of this cult following that was just, like, obsessed with this movie. Like, is this movie good? No. By absolutely no means is this movie considered good. But people loved it. So we ended up getting 6 sequels, and their titles really crack me up. So I'm going to read them all. And then if you guys like this episode, maybe, this podcast is going to get so big, obviously, that annually I'll do another Leprechaun episode around March. I think that could be something fun to do. So our 6 sequels and the remake. Our first movie is Leprechaun. It came out in 1993. Then we had Leprechaun 2 in 1994. We had Leprechaun 3 in 1995, and this is where it starts to get off the rails. We had Leprechaun 4, in space in 1996. And this was supposed to make it more comedic. Apparently, something about, like, the leprechaun falls in love with a space princess, I think is the plot. So that's a lot. Then they had a little bit of a hiatus. And then in 2000, we got Leprechaun in the Hood, which was a black comedy starring Ice-T. And this was during his run in Law & Order. So, like, once he joined SVU, he also did this film. Like, he should have known better that this, like, he didn't need to do this for his career. But if you watch Leprechaun in the Hood, Ice-T is there. And then the next film came out in 2003, and it was Leprechaun, Back to the Hood. But it's back, and then the number 2, and then the is spelled THA, and then Hood. So Back to the Hood. This came out in 2003. It was a black comedy, and Davis was still a part of this. Warwick Davis was still playing the Leprechaun. After all of that, he was still there. Our next film came out in 2014, and it was Leprechaun Origins. And it tried to be more of a darker, sinister sort of film, and Davis was not a part of it. He did not want to do it anymore. And it's still not, it still didn't get a lot of great reviews, but I think it did take the tone down from being more of like a comedic thing. It tried to take it more dark. And then in 2018, so we've had like literally 2 years ago, we got another, I think this one's the remake, which is Leprechaun Returns in 2018. And Jennifer Aniston returns to play a little bit of a role, but the plot is focused around her daughter, who ends up releasing this leprechaun again. So it's sort of like a Halloween scenario where it's like the daughter is now being chased, you know? So yeah, this is pretty much all the background info that you need to sort of understand that this movie is terrible. But let's get into the plot, because I watched it the other day to take notes, and I had to keep stopping because I was laughing so hard that I could not focus. Please go watch it. It's on Amazon. I think it's on Hulu. It is so funny. Like, it is genuinely one of the most fun films ever, because it genuinely wants to be something that it's not, and it's so funny. So here we go. Start of the plot. So the movie starts with the leprechaun in like this weird basement. And he says this little poem that's, "Try as they will and try as they might, who steals me gold won't live through the night." So like we're already there. And he's like fondling a pot of gold, like in this weird like castle like stairwell sort of thing. You kind of see him like use his magic to like open a door and then like close it. And then then it cuts. This drunk old dude comes home. He's in a limo. His wife is like, "Why are you in a limo? We are far too poor. We live in this old farmhouse." And he's like, No, don't worry. Did you get the package from the funeral home?" And she's like, "I thought you were going to bury your mother, not have her ashes sent to us." So he picks up the funeral urn that supposedly has his mother's ashes in it, and he breaks it, which like stresses me out a lot. But inside is a bag of gold coins. And he says, "Look, I found this leprechaun. I caught him," which means he had to show me where his gold was. "I got it fair and square. We're rich now. We have all the gold that we need. We're going to go live in a mansion." And the wife is like, "You're insane. I'm going to go make some tea. You need to like get your shit together." So she goes to make tea, and she starts to hear this little girl's voice singing "Mary Had a Little Lamb," and it's coming from the suitcase that the old man brought home. So she kind of like walks over, and she's like kind of spooked and kind of scared. And then the little girl's like, "Can you please let me out? I'm suffocating in here." Which, like, oh my God, don't open the suitcase. Leave it alone. It's clearly not something that you should be messing around with, you know? So she ends up opening up the suitcase, and the leprechaun obviously jumps out and pushes her slash like scares her. It's like kind of hard to tell what happens. I think he just like scares her, and she falls down the stairs and dies. Bottom line, she falls down into the basement and dies. The old man comes into the house, and the leprechaun is like holding the tray of tea, and he's like, "Your wife makes fantastic pot of tea." Like, it's just so ridiculous. And then the old man is like, "You got to get out of here." He gets his gun and a 4-leaf clover, and he starts chasing the little leprechaun around the house, because apparently 4-leaf clovers are like, leprechauns do not like 4-leaf clovers, supposedly. I don't know why. So he ends up chasing him down into the basement and shoots him. And the leprechaun is like, "You know that can't kill me, blah, 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 blah." But it knocks him out long enough that he ends up putting him into this wooden crate, places the clover on top, and then pours gasoline over the thing. He goes to light it on fire, but he ends up going into cardiac arrest, which we later find out in the film is a stroke. But at the time, it just kind of looks like he has a heart attack and dies. But apparently it's a stroke, but they don't really explain what happens. You're just kind of left to guess that something happened. Anyway, the crate does not light on fire, but because of the 4-leaf clover on the top of the box, the leprechaun cannot escape. He's now stuck in the wooden crate. Then it says 10 years later, and we get a lovely shot of Jennifer Aniston in a Jeep with her quote from the film, "Hick of a father," unquote. She's basically that character that I don't want to say that she always plays, but that character that she played a lot in the start of her career, which was like I'm the rich girl that's really pretty. Why am I staying in this place that's like so poor? Like, I have money. I'm going to go stay in a hotel. So they drive up to the house. This all takes place in North Dakota too. They explain that then. Um, and she's like, I can't stay in this house all summer. I want to go to LA. I'm immediately going to go stay in a hotel. She does her basic teenage girl complaints. There's no pool, there's no TV. How is she supposed to, live here? Whatever. So she says, I can't live here. She sees a spider, and that's like the end of it. She's like, I can't. It's like a giant tarantula. She's like, I can't live here. So she storms out, and she bumps into this very attractive man, um, who is played by Ken Olant. And he starts to make some comment about like, oh, I'm so sorry I bumped into you, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, whatever, will this cover it? And she just hands him money. And he's like, I'm sorry. And then she's like, okay, well, here's more. And she keeps like pulling out more money. And he's like, how about like an apology? I think that would fix it. And plot twist, she doesn't apologize. She just hands him more money and goes to make a hotel reservation. He then makes a really misogynistic comment about how girls are just always so scared of everything. And because this is the 90s, Aniston does not stand for that. So she decides that she's going to like prove to him that she is strong and smart. And so she is going to stay in the house. She says, I'm going to stay. I'm going to stay. Don't worry about it because I'm a strong woman and women are equal and blah, 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 blah. Then we meet this intelligent kid. His name is Alex. He's played by Robert Hy Gorman. And the dad is like, hey, so do you need any help with any of your projects or whatever? And Gorman, who's this little kid, he states some like legal jargon about how handling equipment will not help with his insurance or something like that, and then strolls away like very confidently. So you start to understand that this kid is like a little more intelligent than his friend, who is, for lack of a better term, and they use it in the film, but he's a little slow. He's a little off. So then Aniston comes around to bring Olant some juice. She goes to walk into the basement, and there's a jump scare where he like drops tarps on her, which like the basement is clearly not a high vaulted ceiling. So the fact that she doesn't see him up on a ladder with tarps, like when she walks down, like it doesn't really make sense, but it makes for like a little bit of a jump scare. And then they see the giant crate where the leprechaun is sitting, and Olant says that they should definitely open the crate. And Aniston's like, well, I can do it. Just get me a crowbar. It's like that weird like power play sort of flirting thing. Like they're flirting the whole film. And it's sort of like, oh, well, I'm the strongest one. And then Aniston's like, well, actually, I'm the strongest one because I'm a woman. And he's like, yeah, well, I'm a man. And like, it's that weird sort of like power play flirting dynamic thing. But before they can open up the crate, Ozzy, who is played by Mark Holton, spills paint all over himself. And so they all have to run upstairs to go help Ozzy with all the paint on himself. Now, Ozzy's character he's like an adult, but he's best friends with the little kid, Alex, played by Gorman. And he's just a little off. They make a comment later about how people make fun of him behind his back because he's a little slow. He's not that smart, stuff like that. So he's sort of kind of like a big child, if that makes sense. That is important to the plot a little bit later. So sorry if my wording was incorrect. I don't mean to offend anybody, but that's how the character is in the film. Holton then starts to like tell a story, and it's kind of clear that like he just makes stuff up, and he doesn't really know what he's talking about. He starts talking about a UFO and like, oh, of course that's not real, whatever. So he goes into the house, and he starts to hear a voice coming from the crate. And he's like, oh no. So he walks over to the crate, and he's like, well, hello? And as he's down there, he knocks off the 4-leaf clover. So now the leprechaun can get out. The leprechaun like punches through the crate and pops out, tells him he's a leprechaun, all this ridiculous stuff. And of course, like obviously as the audience member, we know that this is a trick that the leprechaun uses a lot, is like changing his voice to get out of things. And the leprechaun kind of like shines his shoes and then like tells him that he's going to like turn his ear into a boot. It's very strange, but he basically says like, where's my gold? Like, I need my gold. And when Holton goes to run out of the room, the door slams shut, but then he's able to pull it open, and the leprechaun says, it's because my powers are weak, because I don't have my gold. My powers are weak. He runs outside, and obviously nobody believes him. He's like, there's a leprechaun in the basement. Everybody's like, yeah, okay, Ozzy. So everybody goes down into the basement to go check and see what's up. But Olant's kind of leading the way. And there's this part where he picks up this like little stick and he's like, just in case. But like, what would that, like, if you see it, you're like, what would that stick possibly do to anything that's dangerous? Like, it's not going to do anything. And we all know it's not going to do anything. So like, don't pretend. So they all go down into the basement and they don't see him, obviously, because he's hiding, because duh. And then they hear a noise from the corner and they get closer and closer and closer. And bam! It's a rat. It's just a jump scare rat. It's literally like, it's just there to scare you. They're like, it's just a rat. We know what the noise was. Bye. They step outside and this big rainbow appears outside. And Holton is like, dude, this rainbow means leprechaun. And if we go to the end of the rainbow, we can find his gold. And so they're like, we have to finish painting the house. Like, where are you going? And the little kid, Alex, is like, hey, don't worry. I'll follow him and make sure he's okay. So he runs to go help Holton with his thing. It leads to this like broken down car. Like, it just kind of cuts. And then they're like at this broken down car where the rainbow is clearly ending. So they get into the car, they find a gold coin first, and then they find the bag of gold, and they're sitting there, and they're like, well, how do we know if the gold is real? And Ozzy's like, well, in the movies, they bite it. So he goes to bite the coin. He ends up swallowing it, like, duh, of course he does. And this is important. This isn't just a bit. Like, this is important to the plot. Because the leprechaun needs all of his gold, and now he has swallowed a coin. So then Gorman decides that he's going to hide the gold in an old well by the house, but he's going to take one coin that he can take to someone to say whether or not this is gold. And even after all of that, the little kid is like, can you stop saying that this is a leprechaun? Like, leprechauns aren't real, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just so, it doesn't make any sense, like, at all. Anyway, so he takes the coin. They get back. They're like, sorry, we didn't find anything, blah, blah, blah. So then Gorman also makes this comment where he's like, oh, Ozzy, like, if we get this gold and it's all real, we can spend it to get you a surgery to make you intelligent and, like, make you smart. And it's, like, so sad. It's such a weird comment. And, like, later in the film, he says, like, I know that the surgery isn't real, but he doesn't know. And it's like, well, like, I know he's just trying to make him feel better, but, like, also you made him feel really bad because you told him that he's really dumb. You know, like, it wasn't the best move. Anyway, so then it cuts to some lovely, flirty, sexy painting time where hot boy Olant is teaching Aniston how to paint a house, and it's, like, sexy because they have paint all over them. And he's like, oh, I guess we got to go refill the paint. And he goes to walk away, and she's like, well, why don't you see how a real pro does it? And she walks away to go get the paint. Meanwhile, the leprechaun's underneath the car. The paint's in the back of the truck. Leprechaun starts, like, stroking her leg, and she's like, oh my god, Nathan. She's like, what are you doing under there? Because obviously he went and crawled under the car for a bit, of course. And then when she sees him, she's like, oh my god, what's under there? And she goes to pull back, and the leprechaun scratches her leg. They tell her it's a cat. The dad hears some meowing. He's like, it's a cat. So he goes to reach his hand into this little stump to get the cat, and the leprechaun, like, bites the hell out of his hand. Like, it's like this bloody mess. It cuts to, like, this weird see-through thing of the hole in the tree, and the leprechaun is, like, wiping his mouth of blood, and he's, like, making all these puns that just aren't good. It's really bad. So then they have to take the dad to the hospital. So they hop in the truck, they go to the emergency room, and the dad has to stay overnight. Of course he does. Of course the only adult has to stay the night, because that way the leprechaun can have full reign of the teenagers. So then you find out that the leprechaun is following suit, but he's following suit on a tricycle. And in my notes I just wrote, leprechaun follows suit on a tricycle, ... Wow. Because who thought that that was a good idea for a horror film, that he was going to ride a tricycle? Like, I don't understand the logic. That seems like that wouldn't be the goal. Anyway, so the two dummy kids take the coin to somebody who can verify that it's real. He's like a pawn shop owner, basically. He says, well, if this is real, it's going to be worth, $500. But if it has historical value, it could be priceless. And the kids are like, sick. And he goes, do you mind if I keep this overnight to study it so that I can give you, like, a final value on it tomorrow. You can come back and pick it up. And they're like, well, you're not going to lose it, right? And he's like, no, I'm going to put it in my safe and everything's going to be fine. It's not going to be a big deal. And they're like, okay, because they're kids, so they don't know. So then he goes to look at it. The kids leave to go meet Aniston and Olant at the diner. And it keeps cutting back to them. And they're like, where are they? They should be here right now. And then it like cuts to them with the coin. So then this dude is like, I don't even think you learn his name. He's like looking at it. He goes to lock it in the safe. And then he gets hit with a tricycle. Like the tricycle like flies in. It like rolls in and hits him. And he's like, what? And he goes to walk away. And then he's like, fine, I'm going to open up the safe. And we all know what's about to happen. He opens up the safe and the leprechaun's inside. And the leprechaun pops out and like kneecaps him, but like with a bite. So he like bites his kneecap. Said he can't walk. And then he hands him the coin. He's like, where's my coin? Where's my gold? Where's my gold? So he gives the gold coin back. And then the leprechaun is like, thank you. And he like gets on a pogo stick and like pogo hops on the dude's corpse. Well, he's not dead yet. He kills him by like pogo sticking on his chest. And he's like making all these puns that just like don't, like they aren't good puns. It's like a dad joke. He's just making a bunch of dad jokes while killing someone. Then he shines the guy's shoes. So this is important. He's a shoe shiner by trade. This adds to the plot later. You'll understand. But he shines the shoes. And then he's like, he'll be fine in the morning. And so he walks away. He just like leaves. And he finds this little truck. It's like a tiny motorized kid truck. So he finds that. And he's like, oh boy. And he says something about like the gods are smiling. The god is like smiling down upon him or something like that, whatever. So he gets in that car with a bunch of like with the pogo stick and, a bunch of stuff from the store. So then it cuts to an officer sees the leprechaun driving on the street in the car. And so his natural thought is like, it's some kid being a dick. I got to go pull him over. So he goes and pulls over this tiny little car on the street. And he walks up to the car and he shines the little flashlight and he's like, yo, what's up? And the leprechaun's like, what? I'm just trying to get back my gold. And the dude's like, can you take off that scary mask? And the leprechaun's like, it's not nice to make fun of a leprechaun. And he's like, oh, you're a leprechaun, huh? And so the leprechaun just like stabs his fingers into the dude's face, which like honestly he kind of deserved. So then some mind games happen in the woods, and it keeps cutting back to Aniston in the diner with all the kids and whatever. He plays these games where like he's hiding behind a tree, very Scooby-Doo. He's behind one tree and then he pops out. He's behind another tree, he pops out, that sort of thing. He ends up just like snapping his neck, like very unceremoniously, and then like somehow the body gets back in the police car, which is important to note. But somehow the body gets back into the police car. Just I don't think it's ever explained, but somehow the body gets back into the police car. You can assume that the leprechaun like dragged in there. So then we cut to the diner. Aniston's character says that she doesn't eat meat. And Olant like really criticizes her because he's like, you're wearing leather shoes. Because she makes a comment about like, what you're eating right now, that meatloaf is just dead cow if you're lucky. And then he's like, you're wearing leather. That's dead cow. Like, you can eat meat. You're going to be fine. And she's like, it's different. So then we cut to the leprechaun is now in the house. He's searching through everything in the house. He's like, where's my gold? Where's my gold? And this is also important to note because there's a line later where they reference Lucky Charms, but there's a box of cereal that is called Lucky Clovers. And he like eats a bit and then like throws it away. And it's supposed to be funny, but later they say Lucky Charms. So like if you had the rights to put it in the script, why didn't you have the rights to use the box of cereal? Like I don't understand that logic. Anyway, just some lovely continuity errors in the film. This is one of many. If I want to do I could do a whole episode on the continuity errors of this film, but I don't have time today if I'm going to give you the whole plot. So as we move on, he kind of is like searching through the house. He ends up like shining all the shoes and like putting them on the counter. When everybody returns, Holton's like, it's the leprechaun. You see the shoes, it's the leprechaun. And they're all like, oh, it's a bear, because bears come down from the woods all the time. It's not a big deal. So they end up cleaning everything up. There's some more like weird like flirting happening between Aniston and Olant, obviously. And then Holton is like, well, what would you do if you had to kill the leprechaun? And the little kid is like, I would shoot him in the head because nobody can survive being shot in the head, right? You would think. Like, if you're a little kid, you're like, I'll just shoot someone in the head because they'll die. Um, so then they hear this bell in the kitchen. They go to sort of like investigate the bell because there's a bit earlier where they think it's the leprechaun, but it's really just Ozzy with the bell. So they think it's Ozzy again, but it turns out that he's holding the bell and he's not clicking it, and they hear a bell coming from like the kitchen and then outside. So Olant goes to figure out what's going on. He ends up tripping and falling in a bear trap. So he gets his leg caught in a bear trap. And then the leprechaun does this whole bit where he's like, I'm a surgeon, time to amputate the leg. And he goes to like chop it off with an axe. Olant starts like punching this little leprechaun dude. Everybody runs outside. They're trying to help him. They get a shotgun. He ends up trying to shoot him a bunch. He's like limping. It's like really dramatic. There's a lot of blood. Um, the leprechaun tries to like gnaw his wound off, which is also like a lot. Holton goes in to call the police, but he says, "Oh, there's a leprechaun. You gotta come help." And like obviously, the police are not going to believe him that there's a leprechaun. Like he's apparent. It's apparent that he's called in before, saying that there's something wrong, and there's never been anything wrong. So they don't believe him when he said that there's a leprechaun. Like obviously. Aniston beats up the leprechaun, which is kind of fun to watch Jennifer Aniston like punch a leprechaun. Like it's really enjoyable to just watch her like go to beat up this leprechaun. Oh, this is something that really bothered me, and I will talk about this later. This is a continuity error that I have to talk about. It's a shotgun. It's like a 2-barrel shotgun, and he fires like 8 shots out of it without reloading. And like, look, I'm not the biggest like gun enthusiast in the entire world, but that is not how guns work. Like that's just not it, sis. Unless you had like 8 guns that you were holding that you fired off, like there's no way that you would have that many shots in a 2-barrel shotgun. So I'm going to keep a tally of how many times he reloads, but he fires, I think, like 6 or 7 times without reloading. Still hasn't reloaded, and the leprechaun escapes. They go to call the police. The phone lines have died, and they try to fix Olant's wounds. And then they try to get him into the car, but the car won't start because it's a horror movie, and they reference it a little bit earlier that the car won't start. So they go to lift up the hood of the car. The little kid gets out to lift the hood up off of the car. Wow. And the leprechaun is in the hood of the car because duh. So then he kind of gets out. They roll up all the windows. He ends up like busting through the windshield of the car to attack them. And Aniston pulls that, like in cars. I don't know if they still have them nowadays. Not a lot of people smoke that as much anymore. The little like lighters, the little like lighter thing that's in the car. She pulls that out and she like jams it into his nose. And so they all kind of get to escape. The leprechaun then like goes into the barn. There's like a barn apparently. He goes into the barn and he gets out his little toy car and he like rams the big car and it like topples the car over, which is just like ridiculous because like obviously that little car does not have enough power to topple over a pickup truck with 4 people in it, And then they manage to get into the house, and they close the door on the leprechaun's hand, and his hand like falls off and then like crawls out. And then he just reattaches it. Like it's not a big deal because, he's a mythical creature. So then they start like hella locking up the house. Like they start like locking up all the windows, all the doors, everything's shut. They're trying to make sure that they're totally safe. And Aniston's like, wait, I have a portable phone because I'm rich in this film. So I'm going to try to call someone, but her battery dies midway through the call with the police. So the police officer goes to call it in. He's like, hey, you're the closest one to this location. Can you do it? And it turns out it's the police officer that the leprechaun killed. So the leprechaun, using his magical voice powers, is able to say, oh, I'll be there, and my ETA is like 5 minutes. I'll call if I need backup. That way the police, like, they're not going to show up. So Aniston's like, why are the police not here yet? Nothing's going on, blah, 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 blah. She's trying to save everyone. She kind of comes into her own at this point. She's kind of adulting. She's trying to make sure everything's okay. And honestly, her performance in this, like the film is bad. Her performance in this is not as bad as the film. But, if you're given poor writing, there's only like so much you can do. But you'll see like it's very Jennifer Aniston early career. Like it's very much what she did in Friends. It's that sort of like rich girl who's frustrated with everything sort of vibe. Holton ends up like slipping up and talking about how they hid the gold somewhere, And Aniston is like, fine, if it's a leprechaun, I'm just going to go get him his gold and he can leave and then we can all go home. Like, if we give him his gold, everything's going to be fine. So she goes outside of the house with the shotgun and gets the gold from the well. Holton tells her this is where it is. She goes and gets the gold from the well. She hands it to the leprechaun, runs back into the house. And then she's like, everything's fine. We're going to get out to the car and everything's going to be fine. The leprechaun counts all the gold. He needs 100. He only has 99 because if you remember, Dummy decided that he was going to swallow a coin. Leprechaun's like, they tried to cheat me. So he ends up like coming out of the fridge. Like they go to open up the fridge to get ice or something. And the leprechaun like jumps out of the fridge and it's so ridiculous. And then there's a lot of like Scooby-Doo chasing. Like he like skateboards by a hallway. He fires some shotgun rounds off. He plays like peekaboo in these cupboards and the dude's like firing shotgun rounds into the cupboard, still hasn't reloaded. And then after all this peekaboo shit happens, he finally, I wrote in all caps, finally reloaded the damn gun. Like it took him like he fired at least 14 shots off before reloading this gun. And look, that is not how a double barrel shotgun works. Like that is not it, sis. That is not how guns work. If you're gonna have a movie that's trying to be scary and realistic, have him reload the gun for tension. I don't know. Or give him like an automatic rifle at that point, because that's basically what he's doing. Anyway, so then they're trying to figure out where the last coin is. Holton says he ate it. And he's like, I have to go outside because it's my fault. And if I die, then we can all be safe. So he like jumps out and they're all like, no, Ozzy, come back. So they go and they save him. He ends up getting his ear like bitten and whatever. And then Holton says, well, if you got to know how to beat him, you got to go talk to the old man, the old dude that used to live here. So then they mentioned that he had a stroke and it's not cardiac arrest. And in my notes originally, I said suffers cardiac arrest, ? And then as the movie progressed, I wrote not cardiac arrest, but a stroke, ? Because they don't really say what happened. It's just like all of a sudden he like kind of passes out in the intro, like the prologue. So like it's never explained what happened. So now you kind of get closure like, oh, he had a stroke. Makes more sense. So to get out of the house so that Aniston can get to the hospital, like the old folks home that he's at, they throw shoes out of the door. And the leprechaun is like, well, I can't fight you until I shine these shoes. So he's like grabbing all the shoes and shining them and blah, blah, blah. She gets into her Jeep, drives away. She sneaks into the old folks home. She finds this old man because this fucking guard is just like sleeping on the job and he's clearly not doing his job well. And the scene is like ridiculous. Like she would be making so much noise. He would know that she was there. It doesn't make any sense. She goes to the room and she starts having a conversation with who she thinks is the old man. But obviously we know because horror, it's just a leprechaun. He's in a wheelchair. He turns around. Boom. It's the leprechaun. Jump scare. Also there's like a continuity thing where like the papers on the desk like magically move around. Like they start switching places even though she didn't put them there. It's a lot. So then there's a wheelchair chase through the old folks' home, very horror movie, and then she is an idiot, and so she gets into the elevator, which, like, in a horror movie, if you're being chased, don't go in the elevator. That's poor planning. So then from the top of the elevator, very, like, Silence of the Lambs style, the old man kind of falls out. He's, like, dying and dead. And he starts to tell her, like, you need a 4-leaf clover. You got to touch it to him, and then you can kill him, blah, 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 blah. She's like, okay. And then conveniently, he's like, there's a clover patch next to the old well at the house. Then it just cuts to her in the car. So, like, she must have outrun the leprechaun, but, like, we don't get to see that. It just kind of, like, cuts to her in the car, almost back. And then the leprechaun is chasing her in a wheelchair this time. So if you'll now remember, he has now chased them on a tricycle, a little wind-up car. I think he chases her to the hospital on roller skates. Yes, he gets roller skates in to chase her to the hospital. And now he's in a wheelchair. So he's fully gone through a full mode of transportation except a real car, like, or just walking. Like, he won't do that. So Aniston is trying to find the 4-leaf clover. He grabs her before she can find it. She runs to the police car because she's like, oh my God, the police are here. But it turns out it's the dead guy. She's like, oh my God. Then like some green like goopy gore happens with like the shotgun, and she like stabs his eye with like a police baton, and he like takes the police officer's eye and puts it in his eye because he lost his. Now he gets shot, they escape. It's just like a lot. um this Gorman is an idiot, and he decides that he's going to set a bear trap up in the barn where the leprechaun has been like hiding out, because he's like, I'm not scared of you and I can kill you myself, because dumb kids. And then they're looking through the clover field, and Aniston has like a breakdown. She's like, we're not going to find this clover. We don't have time for this. We're totally dead, blah, blah, blah. And Holton's like, all you have to do is believe. And she goes like, fine, I believe that we're going to find this clover. And then magically they find the clover. Super cool stuff. Gorman obviously gets caught, and they hear him screaming. And the leprechaun, which I think this would be sick, very like Saw, he tries to like put the kid's head into the bear trap, which I think like it's pretty on par for this film. Like, I'm surprised it didn't happen. And then Gorman ends up escaping because Ozzy shows up, and he's like, I ate the coin, it's in my stomach. And then the leprechaun is like, well, I must cut open ye stomach then, and like chases him around and starts like, chopping up his stomach, blah, 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 blah. You know, one thing leads to another. Gorman is like, I got you, Ozzy, I got you. And he puts gum on the 4-leaf clover. He puts it in his slingshot. And this is the best line in the whole film. I have it written down in all caps with some laughing. He says, fuck you, Lucky Charms, and then fires the clover into the leprechaun's mouth. And then the leprechaun ends up like deteriorating and like vomiting up this like green goopy gore sort of thing, and falls into the old well. And before I continue, I just have to state, so infuriating that they have a box of Lucky Clovers earlier in the film. But then all of a sudden he says, fuck you, Lucky Charms, which means that in this universe, not only do Lucky Clovers exist, but Lucky Charms also exist, which doesn't make any sense. Because if you got the rights to say it in the script, why couldn't you have gotten the rights for that bit that you did earlier, or just cut the bit? Just cut the bit. It wasn't that impressive anyway, and nobody wanted it there. Like, you know what I mean? It just, I don't know. It really bothered me, and I had to pause and like really, I was like, maybe I misread, but no, it's called Lucky Clovers, but then he says Lucky Charms later. It's like they used off-brand, but then they used the brand name. Anyway, don't really understand that. Then he falls into the well. He starts deteriorating. They're all like, whoa, yeah, how exciting. And then he crawls back up. Where's me gold? And so Olant like pushes him back down into the well. They pour gasoline into the well, and they go to light him on fire. But because it's a movie, it's more of like a wild ass explosion, which like, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I don't know. Maybe Mythbusters can do something with it. I don't know if that's really how that would work. But there's a huge explosion, and I wrote explosion question mark, because to me it seemed like he would just light on fire, but it's very like dramatic. And then the police show up, and the leprechaun has this little poem at the end that says basically like he's not dead yet. And then the film ends. So in case you couldn't tell, this film is like very ridiculous. It is hilarious. If you are the type of person, like in my family, how my dad and I bonded a lot, and how my siblings and I bonded a lot, was like watching really bad movies and like picking them apart. There's this YouTube channel called Cinema Sins. They also have like music video sins and stuff like that. They're really funny. And if you watch that, like that's normally how I watch a film, is like I pick it apart and I'm like, but how did that cup of water have less water in this shot than it did in the first one when nobody took a drink out of it? Like that's how I watch films and stuff. So it's really fun to watch bad movies and kind of like pick apart, like, why did they choose to do this? Like, who thought this was a good idea? Whatever. But what's interesting about this movie is that it made money. Like, I think it got like $8.5 million in the box office, and it had a $1 million budget. But the critics like hated it, like terrible reviews, as it should. I mean, you just heard what it is. Feel free to watch it, create your own opinion, but like it's terrible. And the fact that there's 8 films about this leprechaun, and I just don't know. I think they were trying to do like a Chucky thing, but it just like wasn't. At least Chucky's scary sometimes, but like he's not scary. He's just like a weird looking leprechaun. And like you can look up the makeup, like they did some weird things to him. They also talk about how his teeth are bad. Like there's just a lot of random stuff in this film that doesn't make sense. But this, there we go. that's the plot of the film. It's my personal opinion that the film is really bad, but it's a really good time to watch. This was Jennifer Aniston's first film. This is like where she got her start. Um, and then I think from here she moved on to Friends, and that was like where she started to get her big like name for herself. And I believe this movie was pre Nose Job. I could be wrong about that, but I think this was right before she got her nose job for Friends. So you can see she looks a little bit different, but also looks like the exact same in the same way. You know what I mean? Like she hasn't really aged um, at all. But yeah, this was Leprechaun number 1. Let me know if you'd like me to talk more about the sequels, Back to the Hood, or things like that. My plan right now, if this podcast continues the way that it's going, which is A, it's making me really happy. B, it's getting more views, and C, it lasts as long as I want it to. This will become an annual thing, and so every March I'll start to do a little episode on leprechauns. I like having like little series within a series. That's always something fun that I like to do. Like I did my Grimm's Fairy Tale. I think that was last week, and that's going to be a mini series within each season. And then this will be like sort of an annual thing to look forward to, is that I'll watch one of the Leprechaun movies and I'm going to try to do them in order and let you know what I think. If they make any more, let me know. If you have any questions or comments, or you just want to reach out and talk about horror movies and stuff like that, let me know what you thought about sort of a plot-based review versus me talking about like true crime, or me just talking about my 2 cents. Let me know what you thought about sort of like more of a movie-based episode. If you guys like it, if you don't, if you like the time, this one's going to be a little bit longer than my other ones have been lately. So just let me know. I like hearing back from you guys. The email is whispersfrombelow@gmail.com. And the handle on Instagram is whispersfrombelow. No spaces, no uppercase, no underscores, no nothing. Just straight up, that URL has not been taken, which is really lovely. So yeah, you can message me on Instagram. You can send an email. Do whatever you need to do, but I really would love to hear from you guys. This goes up every Monday, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. I post it to YouTube every Monday. I mean, it's everywhere, so you have no excuse not to tell your friends to listen to it. And remember, Aniston got her start in a terrible horror film. Davis was in 6 of these movies before he realized that it probably wasn't great for him. And Lucky Clovers and Lucky Charms exist. They both exist in the same universe at the same time, apparently.